How's it going, my spuds? It's your bud C-Dubs here. The new summer update brings players back to Aquila to do different types of challenges and offers new gear, new pets, and new spells for your wizard. But new players or returning players that aren't familiar with the new mechanics of the game might be a little confused on how to do some of these new challenges. So in this video, we're going to talk about the basics to rematches and challenge modes. We'll see a few examples for how to prepare for these fights. We'll go over a few mistakes that most players make or may not be aware of for their first time through. And then I'll end with final thoughts and credits. Information on this topic can be kind of hard to find because it's pretty scattered across the internet, and also every single challenge mode or rematch is different, so not all information is universal across other sources. So instead, I wanted to make a universal guide or kind of a beginner's tutorial as to how these fights work, and that way, regardless of what fight it is that you're doing, you'll have a good baseline of knowledge that can be applied to previous or even future battles created by KingsIsle. There's a couple of ways you can initiate the challenge mode in Wizard101. One of the first examples is shown here with the one-shot dungeons. These have been in the game for quite a few years, but they've recently been overhauled by the new challenge modes. The predecessors to the new challenge modes are actually what you're seeing here. This is the Mastery, Archmage, and Exalted duels. For those of you unfamiliar, these are termed one-shot dungeons because you place them in your house, you get one attempt to do it, and after that attempt is completed, you are then left with a trophy that remains in your house. Some of these one-shot dungeons are still used to this day, such as the Rattlebones Exalted Duel, where most people farm it for the Bone Smasher robe. However, what you will find is the majority of these are no longer really used, and in a way they've almost become a relic to what we now have today. What you're seeing now is the new and improved version of those one-shot dungeons, which are now referred to as rematch challenges. An easy way to tell that this is one of the challenge rematches is that it has the image of the boss on the top instead of the wooden, silver, and gold skeleton heads that the previous ones showed. An important thing to note about these challenge dungeons is that you can run them in standard mode, so what you're seeing here when I step on the sigil and it remains blue is the standard version, which is very similar to the previous sigils that we saw earlier. But instead of having just one version, there is a challenge mode version which you do have to switch over to. So as you can see here, I click this button, it switches over, and now when I step on the sigil, it turns red instead of staying blue. This is an important difference because unlike in the standard mode, challenge mode does offer different rewards and the bosses play differently. So some things you can expect are spell elements, Azoth TC. For your first time completing a challenge mode, you get a gold key, and that's for every wizard you do it on, and completely different item drops compared to the standard version. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a one-time challenge, so once you are done with this fight, it turns into a trophy, which you can see here. The original 3 one-shot dungeons don't really serve a purpose with their trophies. Most people just use them for housing decorations, or they just completely trash them. But that is not true with the rematch challenges because you can actually recycle the trophies in the arena so that way you can recraft these one-shot dungeons. This is also a great improvement from the previous versions because once you were done with the dungeon, that was kind of it. And if you wanted to get another instance of the dungeon, you had to go farm the boss that drops it. That's not true with this. All you need are some certain reagents, which I'm going to show on screen. But if you have deleted the trophy, that is okay. You can recraft this dungeon from the same vendor that I'm showing here. The good news is that these are tradable items, so even if you removed it off one wizard, if you have it on another one, you can simply transfer it for the shared bank. Earlier I mentioned that the early versions of one-shot dungeons had to be farmed in order to obtain them, but that's not true of rematch challenge one-shot dungeons. Instead, you have to reach certain areas of game progression in order to obtain it. So on my wizard here, I'll show you where you can get that. If you go into your spell book, go to your character, go to badges, scroll through all of your badges, and you'll see that at some point, you'll have a specific badge that has a gift box on it. Click the gift box, and it'll show you that you have probably already earned some of these, and you may not even know it. It could just be sitting in your inventory. So go ahead and check your inventory because there's a good chance that you have some of these, and as you can see on screen, there are tons of different rematch challenges. There are also other areas in the game where you can do challenge modes that aren't a part of these one-shot dungeons. For example, I'm going to use the recently updated Aquila stuff. So what you can see right here is Mount Olympus, the original dungeon, turns blue whenever you step on it. But if you switch it over to challenge mode, you'll see that that also turns red, which works just like these housing item one-shot dungeons. One of the first mistakes players will make when they do a challenge mode is loading in with their typical deck. A lot of people will just come in with an aura, a blade, maybe a couple enchants, but then they'll find out that the majority of those items are not even in their hand, they're just completely gone. The reason that that happens is because challenge mode limits what spells you're allowed to use. This is an example of some spells that may or may not work in your deck. So we have some auras, we have some heals, and we have some regular hits. And what you will find is that depending on the dungeon that you're doing, you may or may not have some of these cards show up in your hand. The first thing that you have to look at is the level requirement for a spell. If you look at Fortify, Brace, and Stabilize, you can tell that they're basically the same spell but just a better version that you unlock at a different level. So for example, Fortify is level 52, Brace is level 110, and Stabilize is level 170. Depending on the level that the dungeon is associated with, these spells may or may not show up, and that's based off of this number for the level. This rule applies to any other card that has a level requirement, so you can see here that there are level requirements for these hitting spells that I'm highlighting through. The easiest way to figure out the level limit for that challenge mode, in my opinion, is to just use the wiki. The wiki usually will tell you what level requirement is necessary for the spells. The other requirement is that a spell has to be PvP usable, so any spell that is no PvP cannot be used. Aquila is a great example because there's 3 different dungeons and all 3 of them have different level limits. So for example, Mount Olympus is level 30 and below, Atlantia is level 70 below, and Tartarus is level 90 and below. To quickly demonstrate that, I'm going to go into this first fight in Mount Olympus. And you can see that there are only certain spells that were in my original deck that pop up. None of the auras will appear either in this Mount Olympus fight because they are all above level 30. Now using the same deck as before, let's compare Mount Olympus to Atlantia. The level limit changes from 30 to 70. And as a result, we can now use Earthwalker and Fortify. Finally, using the same deck still, let's compare Atlantia to Tartarus, where the level limit changes from 70 to 90. For this dungeon, I can use King Artorias and Devotion because they are below the level limit. However, I still can't use Brace because it is above the level limit of 90. And because the Feint and the Strong Enchant is a no PvP card, it did not show up in any of the examples we just saw. I have some Archmastery spells that you could originally get from Lore Master. And as you can see, just like Leprechaun, these do not have a level limit. That means that as long as you get an Archmastery pip, you can use them in these fights. The only exception to this is if you have not unlocked the Path B version of the spell, because the original path is no PvP. And like I had mentioned earlier, any spell that is no PvP cannot be used in these fights. Mechanically, there are a lot of differences in these challenge and rematch modes in comparison to the standard modes. So in this section, we're going to talk about a few things that you'll notice that are different from the regular fights. For starters, there is no dungeon recall with these fights, so be prepared when you go in because you won't be able to leave. You also can't use teleport markers, so be prepared to do some more running than usual. Your gear will be locked upon entering the dungeon, so make sure that you have all of your gear set up so that you can go for the entire dungeon without changing it. And this does include your deck, so make sure that you have your deck properly set up so that you can go for the entire dungeon without getting back into it. Also, upon entering the dungeon, your character's stats will be manipulated to reflect the level of the dungeon you're going into. In order to determine that, whenever you enter the dungeon, you can press C on your keyboard, and as I'm showing here, you can see the difference between my original stats and the stats that I have in Mount Olympus. Each level is going to manipulate your character stats differently, so I recommend going in to see what your character stats look like and then immediately walking out to make any changes. Be careful when you collect health and mana wisp for the dungeons that have them because they do not respawn, and because you cannot dungeon recall, you cannot use potions. So be careful when you're grabbing these things because if you grab them when it's not necessary, you might be stealing it from another teammate that needs it more than you. And finally, leaving combat for any reason will not remove you from the dungeon, but will keep you there instead. The only way to get your health and mana back is either by leaving the dungeon entirely, causing a full reset, or collecting the health and mana at the beginning of the dungeon. Now that the Aquila update has been out for a little bit, I've had some time to reflect on it and decide how I feel about these new challenge modes. Honestly, from a playing perspective, these are tons of fun. My friends and I really enjoy coming back to these older style dungeons that don't get as much traffic anymore, but having this new twist to it that makes it feel new and more challenging than it used to be. And even beyond Aquila, I would say that's true with the majority of the challenge and rematch modes, because some of them are really challenging and you have to play them completely different from how you would normally play the game. I've spent a lot of hours playing these challenge and rematch modes over the week, and a lot of my knowledge comes from my friends that have been helping me along the way. Some of them have asked to be anonymous, so for their sake, you guys know who you are, but I want to say thank you for all of the time that you've put in to help me figure out what I'm doing, and hopefully this video will be helpful to others as well. I know there's additional information that I didn't cover in this video, so if you know something about challenge modes or rematches or anything similar that I didn't talk about, feel free to leave it in the comments for others to see. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.